Hello there. Welcome back. This is the Diary of a Nail Who Sticks Out. I am Jack Christian, and this week I'm drawing on the experiences and the mistakes I've made from the last 2 years, and I'm going to share my learnings from those. I think, what have we got? There's 4 main areas, and there's a bit of overlap, and there's some detail. So we'll get into it. But the reason I wanted to do this today is, as I was scrolling through, I don't know, something. It might have been YouTube, it might have been Instagram, it might have been TikTok. The stuff you scroll through. There was a clip from Chris Williamson that kind of like caught my attention and made me think of this podcast. I can't remember exactly what it was that he said, but I'll try and summarize it and paraphrase it, and we'll and you'll get an idea of where we're going with this episode. So essentially what he said was that successful people are, in a sense, the worst people to get advice from for how to be successful, because in the time that they're becoming successful, they're not really thinking about what is making them successful. And in a sense, you can learn more from unsuccessful people, because they are constantly making mistakes and failing, and that kind of constant failure promotes a lot of kind of like ruminating on their failures, figuring out what they did wrong, why they're going wrong, what they can do to improve in the future. And that struck a chord with me, because I would not say that I am a successful businessman. I am not a successful freelancer. I have survived. Like, for the past 2 years, I've survived. I've done okay. But I'm not. I wouldn't consider. I haven't achieved the goals that I wanted, that I set for myself when I started this journey. So, by my own standards, I'm unsuccessful so far at this point. We'll see how we do in the future. So with that in mind, I've talked about it in episodes before, but I've made many mistakes, and I've had to if I gave myself I would give myself a score as at being a good freelance person, as I'd be a 4 out of 10 at the moment. Not in terms of the services I provide, but in terms of my ability to generate business and do that. It would be a 4 out of 10. And I started at a 1. So I'm going to tell you the mistakes I made and the lessons I learned from them that brought me from a 1 to a 4. So yeah, here we fucking go. So the first kind of right back when I started, this was I'm almost embarrassed to say how long it took me to kind of get out of this mindset of build it and they will come. That for some reason I thought that when I started freelancing full time, word would naturally spread about me and I would have no trouble finding work. When I started going full time freelance, I had been working at one of the biggest creative agencies in the country for 4 years. And I'd spent a year doing freelance work for household name brands in the UK, and I was doing okay. And I thought, given the work that I'd done, people would just be falling over themselves to hire me. That was completely and utterly wrong. In fact, no one wanted to hire me apart from the people that already were hiring me. It took me a long time to start getting work from outside my network. But this... Sorry, I've lost my train of thought. This kind of like, once I kind of like, because it was really just an ego thing that I didn't want to put myself out there. And eventually when I kind of like got over that, I realized that I did need to put myself out there and try and find work and be proactive about it. That prompted a lot of a long period of education about marketing and how to sell my services. It's a period I'm very much still in. I'm very much learning about that and the best ways to do that. And I'm trying lots of different stuff at the moment, as I talk about all the time, to really kind of like figure out what works best for me, both in terms of results and in just being able to execute on it. So build it and they will come is a complete fallacy. Absolute bullshit. You've got to tell people that you exist. So, numero dos. Number 2. You have to play the game. What does that mean? Well, again, it was an ego thing for me. That there was many things that I didn't want to have to do, and because of the way that egos work, they then tell you that you're better than, or at least this is how mine works. It tells you that you're better than doing what everyone else has to do, and so you shouldn't do that because you're better than it. Again, it's kind of like overlaps with the last point, but I struggle, like for a long time I struggled with the idea that my kind of like creativity and my skills was not what people were hiring me for. They are things that what people pay me to do is to get them a result that they want. They're not paying you to create some useless masterpiece. You have skills that they lack that can take them to a place they want to go. That's why they hire you. And it took me a long time to realize that. And again, it's just an ego thing. You can tell I've got a real ego issue. But this also kind of played into stuff that I was doing for myself. So it wasn't just about client work. I think it's much easier to kind of like understand that clients are paying you for a result. But it was what I really kind of like struggled with on this issue was stuff I was doing for myself. So when I started writing my blog, I enjoyed the process of writing and the freedom that it gave, but it kind of like really jarred with me that I couldn't just write about anything that I wanted, and that if I was going to get the results that I wanted from my blog, it wasn't going to be because I'd written some masterful article about some random topic that was nothing to do with my freelance services. I needed to learn to use my blog in a targeted way to generate those SEO results that I was looking for. And it took some time to come around to that idea, and I've kind of I do it now. I'm fine with it now, and I find ways to kind of like once you kind of get into it, I've found ways to kind of spread a message that I want to spread more generally, but through kind of like specific topics in my blog. And it's still able. So I'm still writing about a general area that I want to spread a message on, but I'm also taking advantage of SEO opportunities and showing my expertise through writing. So this is the thing about playing the game. Like you can't. I think Guy Ritchie in a podcast interview said something really, I think it's profound, but anyway, he says, it was talking about the phrase "don't hate the player, hate the game," and he was saying that's stupid. Like, don't hate the player, but also don't hate the game either. There's no point hating the game because you're in it, whether you like it or not. You may as well kind of like get to grips with the game, understand the rules, and then move forward within those rules and get what you want within the bounds of the game. If you spend your whole time rejecting the game that is there nonetheless, then that is wasting time. So the third point is know your price. And this goes a little. So there's two kind of strands to this one. The first one I can kind of like get through. Well, I mean, I can get through them both. So the first point is just about understanding the price you set represents the value of your services. So if you are setting a low price, it's making yourself really cheap to try and get work. That is a signal to people that your work is cheap and shit. Kind of in the same way, when you do that, it's also a signal to yourself that your work is cheap and shit, and your self-esteem is going to crumble, because you're going to get shit clients that treat you like shit, and you're going to hate it, and you're also going to hate yourself because you will start to see the work that you do are cheap and shit. So there's that side to it. The second side to it is understanding that this is kind of like more pertinent to freelancers, but I guess it also has some application elsewhere. But you have to treat freelancing as a business. And when you do that, you start to realize why your prices matter from a business perspective. And the two key areas to talk about here are COGS and cash flow. And when I learned what these two things mean, the whole game changed for me. I started to understand what prices are, like what goes into them, how you make a price. It's not just some arbitrary value like, oh, it'd be nice to earn like X amount for this. That'd be kind of cool. Like, no, there's a way to figure out what a price is. So firstly, what is COGS? It's the cost of goods sold, and that tells you exactly how much it costs you to make something. So it's basically the total of every cost that goes into making something. So that can be like software costs, rent, the wages you pay yourself, everything you pay for whilst you're producing something for someone else is a cost that goes into cost of goods sold. And if you are going to make any profit from that project, then you have to cover the cost of goods sold, and then anything you earn above that is your profit. It's not your wages. Your wages go into the cost of goods sold, but you need to be making a profit. And that goes into the second point, which is cash flow. So cash flow essentially means that you've got money coming in enough to cover the money going out. So if you have a positive cash flow, then you're earning more than you're spending, and your cash reserves are growing. If you have a negative cash flow, then you're spending more than you're earning, and your cash reserves are diminishing. And the reason you need profit above your cost of goods sold on your projects is that you need to have that positive cash flow so that your cash reserves are growing and so your business is growing. If you have a negative cash flow, that means that you are making a loss constantly and you're going to die a slow, painful death, and your business will crumble. Like, you personally won't die, but your business will die. So understanding those things really helps you get into a business mindset. And kind of, for me, it was hard to kind of charge people when I thought I was charging a lot of money. Once I actually knew what went into the prices I was charging, I was like, oh, this needs to happen. And at that point, it meant I could, if someone was like trying to lowball me, I'd be like, no, this is the minimum I need. And if they're like, oh, it's too expensive, then I have no problem in just saying, you can't afford me. We can either figure out another way to do this, or we just move on with our lives. So, number 4 is look inside as much as you look around. So what does that mean? So I think, well, I'll talk about me for a second, because I don't do that enough. So as a kind of like creative, I spend a lot of time looking at other people's work, looking for kind of like inspiration, seeing what trends are happening and what's kind of going on in the world. And when you look at people who are like on top of their game, making incredible stuff, it does prompt you to go like, oh, why can't I win that kind of client? Why can't I create something that brilliant? And for a long time, those questions kind of crushed my confidence and self-esteem, because I was like, oh, I'll never be able to reach that level. I'll never be able to have that kind of client. And I think that's kind of like a toxic mindset that, when switched around, it has actually a very positive effect. So what I mean by that is, like, we're just talking about envy here. So if you're envious of someone else's ability, or if you're envious of someone else's clients, it's easy to kind of like let that turn in on you and just tear you down and just become way too self-critical about where you're going wrong. But what it can do, if you are like conscious about it, is you can look at someone and be like, oh, I'm feeling envy. What am I feeling envious about? Is it someone just produced a wonderful design and this beautiful website that just works so well? Is it that they're using a technology, like they're using like 3D stuff and it just looks really good and you wish that you could do something like that? Is it that they're working for a client that you would like to work for? Like, oh, it'd be so good if I could get that client. If you notice that envy, instead of like turning in on yourself, just use it as a signal to be like, oh, well, this is something that I want. What could I do to get there? And then when you kind of like figure out what it is that you can do to get there, then it becomes actionable and you can start working towards it. So if it's a kind of client, then you can start researching, like, how do I get this kind of client? If it's a skill level or a technology, it's like, oh, well, then I just need to work on my skills and I can start to produce work like that, or I can learn how to use that technology and produce similar work. If you're able to kind of like catch that envy before it twists and turns in on you, and just be able to look inside and be like, oh, well, what is this? What does this envy tell me? Then you can do something really positive with it. So those are the main lessons that I could think of to share with you today. I'm still very much learning about all this stuff. I'm far from the finished article. I've got many more mistakes to make, and hopefully a lot more lessons to share in the future. I think I talk about it a lot in this podcast, and it's the kind of reason that I wanted to make the podcast, is because I want to, rather than being someone who gets to this point in their career where they've made loads of money and they kind of like forget a lot of the shit stuff that goes on in the process of getting there. I want to kind of like document me as I'm going and making the stupid mistakes and just making those like half steps forward. And I want to document that and share that with people, so that people going through the same thing know that they're not alone, but also people who may be about to go start doing similar things can be like, oh well, there's these mistakes that I can avoid. There's these lessons that I can learn from someone else who's slightly ahead of me. Because if you're looking at someone slightly ahead of you, then that person will have those mistakes and lessons in more recent memory. And their advice, I hope, may be more actionable. I don't know. But that's the idea anyway. So I hope this is useful to someone somewhere. I'll try to keep making stupid mistakes so that I can share lessons that I'm sure many people don't need to learn, but I did. So there we go. Anyway, thank you for listening. This is the Diary of a Nail Who Sticks Out. I'm Jack Christian. I will be back next Wednesday. Until then, have a wonderful week and a great weekend. I'll see you next week. Goodbye.